Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Santam Cyber Insurance information session. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nondatulu Mhlungwe, and I'll be your MC this morning. While it's not going to be a long session at all, this is what you can look forward to in the course of this morning. Our very first speaker is Philippa Wild. She is the Commercial Underwriting Head at Santam and is going to be giving us a brief intro to cyber. She'll be followed by Shaw Ackerman. Shaw is the CEO of AVS Cyber Security. And lastly, we will have Simon Coleman. He is the business head at SHA Risk Specialist, the business head of financial lines and digital, at SHA Risk Specialist, a division of Santam. A reminder to all of our speakers that we do have that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you do have any questions for our speakers today, please do pop them in the Q&A function, and we will do our best to answer those in the course of the session. The session has been CPD accredited, so you can look forward to receiving your certificates in the next 14 working days or so. All right, without wasting any more time, let's get right into our very first speaker of the day, Philippa Wild. Over to you.
Thanks, Noni, and welcome everybody to the cyber information session. As Noni mentioned, I'm Philippa Wild, Head of Commercial Underwriting at Santam Insurance. At Santam, we continually look for ways to innovate and provide insurance solutions that really meet our clients' needs in this ever-changing risk environment. The month of May 2022 is our month of launching our cyber offering to all our clients on the commercial side, and we're very excited to work in collaboration with SHA in bringing this product to our clients. The cyber offering will be available on Policy Center, so all policies administered on Policy Center will automatically be able to select it as part of their policy in their offering. And for policies that are administered off platform, there will be the possibility to contact SHA directly and purchase the cover there. It is well known and understood that cybercrime that the threat of cybercrime is real for any organization working with data, information management, and electronic processes. According to our 2021 insurance barometer, 45% of our intermediaries confirmed that cybercrime is the third highest risk for commercial entities. 36% of our corporate and commercial entities themselves believe that it's the fourth highest risk that they'll be facing in the next couple of years. It's very much becoming a situation of not if, but when. Today, it's going to be a great session. You're going to be hearing from leading experts in cybersecurity and cyber insurance with a key focus on risk management and also appropriate insurance cover, specifically with regards to the South African environment. Cybercrime is no longer something that happens elsewhere in the world or to big corporates only. It's happening right here, right now, in our environment in South Africa, and small commercial businesses are being targeted specifically as well. I'd like to at this stage just remind everybody that we have various materials available on our product and also various e-learning to help facilitate and get you to get your cyber insurance accreditation and virtually facilitated training sessions if needed. You also are welcome to write your questions and answers. You're also welcome to raise your questions in the chat as the speakers speak. There will be a specific session after the talks for the answering of the questions, so please feel free to do that. Before I hand over, I'd just like to take this opportunity to really thank you for your continued support. We are super excited about embarking on this cyber journey with you and hope it will bring us a lot of value and specifically to our clients as well. So thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy this morning's session. Back to you, Noni. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philippa, for kicking us off in this morning's session. It's not a question of if, but when. I could not have said it better myself. All right, on to our next speaker now. Shaw Ackerman is the CEO of AVS Cyber Security, and he's going to be giving a presentation on back to basics when it comes to cyber. Over to you, Shaw.
Thank you very much, Noni. So yes, what I actually want to do is I'm going to let Isabel talk about the core of the why of cyber insurance. I just quickly want to touch onto AVS for those of you who don't know AVS and where we fit into the Santam picture and why. So let me just I'd just like to quickly share my screen with you. Sorry. Sorry. Here we go. All right. So let me just put this over here. So maybe just briefly, let me just minimize here. Just about AVS. I mean, we've been around for quite a number of years, and we operate throughout the whole of Africa and the Middle East. And we do incident response for various companies across the Africa and Middle East continent. Just in terms of our approach, I mean, we're very much an IT governance and architectural consultancy. So when we talk about cyber insurance, it's for organizations, it's all about reducing their overall risk profile. So, cyber is to try and understand how that risk is being managed is quite a difficult point. But cyber insurance is about those zeros and ones that you cannot see, and how do you reduce that risk? So this is where we come into the whole equation. So what is quite important is that when we start our journey with a client, it always starts with an assessment, just like you would do a normal assessment at a client when you do physical insurance. The same principle is true for cyber insurance as well, because it sometimes is made very complicated. It's actually not that complicated, but it's being made very complicated. We at least need to have visibility of what we have. And I think once that assessment has been done, then we'll give you a couple of pointers in terms of the strategy or the plan that you need to take. And then the remediation phases will come in, and I'll touch onto that just quickly in my next slide. And then the training and awareness, which Isabel is going to touch on, because it's no use putting a plan together or part of your remediation, putting a policy together, and your users are not buying into the responsibilities they have regarding the insurance policy. And then there's a monitoring component. It's quite important to ensure that whatever you have implemented will actually give you the kind of ROI on your the ROI on what you are spending in terms of either your cyber policy or the technology that you've deployed. And then we lastly, incident response. It's probably been mentioned twice now. It's a question of when we're going to have an incident response, or when we're going to have an incident, and to manage that incident and to keep that cost as low as possible. And there's various factors that makes up that cost, but to keep that cost as low as possible, one has to be a bit more proactive. So the impact and the manageability of the process really needs to look at. And what one needs to do is not just put technology in place or put a cyber policy in place and then think that everything will be sorted, because it won't. You need to make sure that you take your technology that you have and take your business processes and your people and the organization culture and all bring it together. So a cyber policy alone, technology, antivirus, firewalls, all these fancy stuff that the IT guys use alone is not going to do it. People is a fundamental part of making it successful. I think it's even more important these days than technology, because people click on links and we are inquisitive and so on. So we need to manage that. So in terms of the whole process, how we then eventually monitor to make sure that if there are indicators of compromise, meaning if we pick up certain risks, I think you would know that in order to take a snapshot in time, like a balance sheet, to see this is where your risk is one thing, but you really that risk it's not going to change once a year. It changes on a daily basis, which means that one needs to take a very proactive approach and monitor your cyber risk as well. So once you've done the assessment and you're going through this whole process, is also to monitor to make sure that you detect cyber risks quite early, and that your whole automation and orchestration, meaning the workflows in order to manage that risks, are being done in the shortest possible space of time, because every second counts when there are cyber risks, and we want to pick up those things quite quickly. So from an incident response point of view, I mean, we take that first process when it does happen, and we then very quickly log into your systems. We identify where the potential risks are, and we immediately then try and get you up and running as quick as possible. So we are sort of like the Ghostbusters, or you can also see it as, and Simon will explain this, like roadside assistance. So we're your roadside assistants when it comes to cyber. And this is with the core partnership that we have with Santam, is to make sure from a policy point of view, if any policyholder is being compromised, that we can immediately handle it in the most efficient, cost-effective way to get your business up and running again. So that's it. I think from a overall background point of view, and then just to sort of show cyber insurance and where does that fit in. It's all about obviously of transferring risk. I mean, we all know that, and cyber risk is no different, which Simon will explain from there. So I think that's it, high level, just who AVS is, what we do, and as I always say, don't be a victim. Take ownership. Make sure that you do the right things. And your cyber questionnaire that you fill in really has all the pointers of the things that you have to do when you do those questionnaires, and you need assistance, especially from your professional advice perspective. Do make contact with us, and we can quickly take your hand through that journey. You don't have to do it alone. That's what we are there for as part of the process. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, everybody. My name is Isabel, and I'm the People Enablement Director at AVS Cybersecurity. Today, I'm going to be taking you through a back to basics presentation or workshop on what is cybersecurity. I just want to start sharing my screen here quickly. Include sound. Okay. And really, what the objective of today's session for me is twofold. One, let me just see if that's going full screen. Okay. One is to just take this complex concept of cyber and put it into layman's terms for you, so that you can get a better understanding of how important your personal information is, and then how to reduce your risk. So give you takeaway points that you can actually walk away from this session with today, and introduce immediately on how to reduce your risk of becoming a victim of cybercrime. So I am going to ask you to join us on either a second screen or from your mobile device to join our Slido session. And that's really just to make sure that we keep the session interactive throughout. You will see, you actually can use your camera on your phone, and you can join through that QR code, or you can dial into, enter into the URL slido.com with the code 693762. And I have put a passcode on there just to make sure that we are secure and that your information stays secure on that site. So you can be rest assured it is a secure site. We're not going to do anything with your information, but just actually for us to keep in touch with you. If you have any questions and want any of the links that I'm going to be sharing, you're welcome. We can share it with you through that site. So again, if you can do that through slido.com, and the code is 693762. And the passcode is Santam B2B, which stands for Back to Basics. So you will see a screen that actually looks like this if you log on. Oh gosh. On the right-hand side of my screen, you will see an example of what that code looks like, or the screen looks like on your mobile, and it'll ask you for that information. So just to give you an overview of what we're going to go through today, the session forms 3 parts. In the first part, I'm going to take you through really what is cybersecurity, who are hackers and why do they hack, and is South Africa really a target in the greater scheme of all these cyber threats that are going on globally. At the end of that first part, I'm going to ask a question that comes up on your Slido screen, and you can participate in that by answering that question on screen. And from there, we're going to go into part 2 of this section, of this presentation. And here I'm going to go through what are the tools and the psychological tactics that these hackers are using to get you to give away your personal information. And these are called social engineering tactics. And I'm going to go through all the different ishings that these hackers use to get us to give away their information. And then I'll briefly touch on ransomware, malware, and what the risks of data leakage are. But then you really want to stick around because in the third part, the final part of this presentation, I'm going to give you those tangible things that you can walk away with. Once you understand how important your data is and how precious your information is, how you can start securing your information and become less of a victim of cybercrime. So I'm going to get straight into today's presentation because I know that we are limited for time. So ultimately, what is cybersecurity? Like, what are you here to do today? A lot of our clients say to us, just the word cybersecurity is quite overwhelming. And really, when we break it down, cybersecurity is actually just around the internet. So if you have access to the internet, whether that is through your phone or your computer, you are potentially a standard chance of being a victim of cybercrime. And with every click that you do on the internet, with every like that you do on social media, any information that you are putting into any kind of website, you are leaving your own digital fingerprints, just like the fingerprints that we leave, to identify ourselves with Home Affairs in South Africa. You are leaving your own digital fingerprint with every single engagement that you have online and on the internet. And unfortunately, what is happening is that due to a lack of awareness.
Hi, sorry, Isabel. Sorry,
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can you please repeat the passcode? A lot of our attendees are asking. They didn't seem to get it the first time around. Yes, please.
Sure,
Thank
no
you.
problem. Can I go back and then is that coming up on the screen now again? It is Santam B2B, the passcode. Maybe we can just put it in the chat. Let's see if we can just put it in.
Yes, I think let's put it in the chat. Thank you, Isabel.
No problem. Let me do that quick. And it's there. How do I chat? I can only answer. Okay. Code is B2B. Okay, let's see. Does everybody see that answer? I've answered it on somebody's question. Can we just confirm that?
Perhaps let's post it in the chat. I think it's in the Q&A. Let me also have a look.
It is already in the chat. Franklin put it in there, so it's there.
Okay, lovely. Can I move on?
Thanks, Isabel. Yes, you
No
may.
problem. Okay, cool. All right. So as I said, we are making errors through a lack of awareness, and we are giving away our personal information. So cybersecurity ultimately is actually just around the practice of protecting your personal information. And when people say data, from a cyber terminology perspective, data is your personal information. So it's things like your name, surname, your email address, any other personal information that can identify you on the internet ultimately. So why do hackers hack? What do they actually want? What is their objectives? There's three things really, but ultimately they are wanting your data, and we say they're wanting data for dollars. So they are trying to get you to give away your information, and ultimately they're going to make some kind of financial gain from that. From a personal perspective, so which is what impacts all of us from an individual perspective, is impersonation fraud. So a lot of people say, you know, well, I'm not that interesting and I actually don't have enough, a lot of money. So even if they hack me, you know, good luck in trying to get money out of my bank account because there isn't any. But that is actually not what the hackers are ultimately, their goal is. They are impersonating you. So they're getting your name, surname, ID number, email address, and they're going to open up an account in your name. So they're going to a lender of some sort, whether that is a financial institution or just the local store that gives you furniture on HP. And they can open up an account in your name, take those goods, and then ultimately you get contacted 3-6 months later from this lender saying that you are responsible for these, for paying back this loan, or you know the money that they've bought cut in your name. So it's not really about the loss that's going to come out of your bank account, but the loss of what you're going to experience in having to be responsible for paying back or proving that you didn't actually take out that money. From a corporate perspective, and this affects both enterprise clients and small SME clients, is that these hackers are coming into the organization. They are getting in through one person in the organization who has a weak password. And they're getting into the organization through that one person. They're encrypting the information. So very much like if you were kidnapped in real life, in person, and these people who kidnapped you demanded a ransom from your family to get you back. The same thing is happening with data. So they're coming into the organization, they're getting hold of that information, whether it's the information of your employees, the information of your clients, the information of your suppliers, and they're gathering all that information, they're encrypting it, so they're making it into code that you can't read. And then they're saying, well, if you want this back, if you want access to this data again, then you're going to have to pay us a sum of money to get that back. And usually they demand that in Bitcoin, which is untraceable. So is South Africa actually a target of cybercrime? So let's just look at a few statistics. South Africa has a population of 60.68 million people. Of that, 68% of our population are active internet users. So that's 41.19 million people who are active internet users within our population. Of those, we have 108 million people who are mobile users. So you might be asking, well, how is it possible that we have 60 million people in the population, but 108 million mobile users? And this is because a lot of people have multiple devices. So they may use one device for personal use, and they may have one device for business use. They also have an internet connection through either a work device, a laptop, or whatever it is. They might have a separate device at home, and all of these different devices connect to the internet in some way. And then we have 28 million active social media users in South Africa. So that's 46% of our population. So you can see there why we have a risk of cybercrime in our country is because we have so many people who actually have access to the internet. So from a South African perspective, unfortunately, there's been, up until recently, there's been a very low investment into cybersecurity. And until POPI was introduced late last year, there's been a very immature cybercrime legislation. That is improving with the introduction of the POPI Act. However, there is still a lot of companies that have got ineffective cybersecurity strategies. So they're not understanding the risks that are involved with cyber and what they need to do to secure their environment. Okay. And a recent article that just came out indicated that South Africa actually has the 6th highest cybercrime victims globally. Okay, so the first is the UK, followed by a couple of other countries, but we are sitting right up there in the 6th highest cybercrime victims globally. And last year, cybercrime actually cost our country 2.3 billion rand. Now, you know, you've all heard of the most recent attack, which was Transunion. And if you have ever taken out any kind of HP accounts, whether that is a car or a home, or opened up a TrueWords account, your information, because TransUnion was hacked, is now sitting on the dark web. You may have actually been notified that your information was one of those that had been leaked already. So massive risk to every single one of us when the organizations that we deal with are being hacked through or being victims of cybercrime. That makes every single one of us a victim of cybercrime. Other companies that you might be aware of are Transnet. Last year, when Transnet got hacked, their organization was down for 10 days. Not a single person could access their computers. Everyone came into the office one day, tried to put in their username and password to get into their desktop, and there was absolutely no access. That means that there was no imports that came into the country and no exports that could leave the country during that time, because ultimately everything is managed through a computer. And if nobody can access a computer, that means absolutely no operations are happening. Other companies that you may or may not be aware of, both Standard Bank and ABSA, the City of Johannesburg, and the Department of Justice have all been had to release information that they were hacked at some stage. What is happening is that there are a lot of companies that are being hacked that we are not aware of. So because of the implications, and they understand that it creates really bad press, and suppliers or consumers also then understand that, hey, if you aren't taking care of my information, I might not actually want to deal with a company like that going forward. So you'll see a couple of articles that I've just put on screen here. The likes of BCX, as I said, the City of Tshwane, Transnet, SARS. SARS hasn't been a victim of cybercrime. However, what the hackers are doing is they're using SARS to get information of the users. And I'll give you an example of that just now. And then, of course, Transunion was just recently attacked. But as I said earlier, it's not just enterprise clients that are being victims of cybercrime. It also includes the smaller SME clients. And for them, the risk is so much higher because the cost of an attack is multifaceted. It's, there's the theft, the actual theft of the data, and the potential cost, the financial cost implications of having that data lost. Of course, there is that threat of the hacker demanding some kind of ransom. Just a caveat, we do not recommend ever paying that ransom. So if you do have the support, definitely contact the likes of AVS or similar to make sure that they can help you through that process, but never just go ahead and pay the ransom, even though you might feel concerned about the loss and the implications of the loss of that data. As I said as well, when I gave the example about Transnet, the downtime. So when your users come into work and they are not able to operate, there is that cost of downtime. Now, an average company takes about 6 days to recover from a cyber attack. 6 days of downtime has a massive implication from an operational perspective. When your users aren't able to operate, there isn't really any income coming into that organization. Then we have the cost of fines. So with the POPI Act being recently introduced, the POPI Act says that if a customer or if a client has been found to not take reasonable measures to secure the data, whether that is your employee data or your client's data, the organization owners could face a fine of 10 million Rand or 10 years in prison. And then, of course, as I said, there's the reputational damage. So if you know that you're dealing with an organization who has been hacked, and because of that, your information now is sitting in the dark web and you are at risk of becoming a victim of cybercrime, there is that fear and mistrust that you have from dealing with an organization like that who has not taken care of your data. And you might not want to deal with a company like that going forward. And then, of course, there are staff costs. So when your staff aren't operating, there is the cost of the non-operational. But then there's also, if you, what a lot of organizations are moving towards now is because people are becoming more and more aware of the risks of cybercrime, and many organizations are providing cybersecurity awareness training to their employees. If an employee is found to be the cause of an attack, so they're clicking on a phishing email, for example, remedial action can be taken against those individual employees. So what I'm going to do is ask you to go into your Slido screen now. And what you will find there is a question, which is, why do hackers hack? So that seems to, all the answers seem to be coming up on my screen now. But let's just see if we can log in there. And you can absolutely, I see there are 233 people who are probably already answering. But yes, why do hackers hack? Remember, we said data for dollars. So ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to steal your information and they'll get some kind of financial gain out of that. Okay, so let's move on now to part 2, where I talk to you about how do hackers hack? How are they getting you to, or convincing you to give away your personal information? So they're using what we call social engineering tactics. Ultimately, what they're trying to do is deceive you or manipulate you into giving away your personal information, which they are going to be using for fraudulent purposes. So what kind of tactics do they use? They use these very, very clever psychological tactics against us to convince us to give away our personal information. And the first of those is anger. So what they do is they will potentially send you an email or an SMS or phone you and say, you know, your information is going to be handed over to the regulators and you're going to get a bad credit rating because you haven't paid an account. But you know that you actually don't have an account with these people, you don't owe them any money, and you're getting really, really angry and frustrated in the fact that you're being forced to hand over this money that you don't actually owe somebody. Okay? They also use another threat on you, which is fear. So they make you scared, and I'll give you another example just now. For example, that you might have faced litigation or, you know, some kind of major consequence that you're really, really scared of facing, when actually, you know, you are not responsible for that kind of thing. So you're acting quickly because you're scared of the consequences if you don't, give in to what they want you to do. Another one is greed. So they will tell you that you have won the lotto, or one of your great uncles has passed away and left you a great sum of money. And so I mean, we all want extra money. So we fall for these traps of, yes, I've won the lotto. This is fantastic. All you have to do is give your name, surname, and email address, and we'll process the fund for you. Well, all they need is your name, surname, and email address to open up an account in your name and impersonate you. They also use an emotional or psychological tactic in curiosity. So they'll give you a little bit of information, and all you have to do is click on this link and you'll find out more information. So, and we are curious beings. So we often get tricked into clicking on links or opening attachments because we're curious about what information is contained in these files. Another one is intimidation. So often, and I've heard so many examples lately of when the clients will receive a phone call to say, please give me your information. I'm phoning from the bank as an example. And when people start to restrict that or say, I'm not giving my information, they start getting intimidated into giving away that information. So it's another psychological tactic that happens that they use. But always there's a sense of urgency. So I tell my clients, these hackers don't have time to sit around and wait for you to click on a link 2 weeks later or answer that SMS. They want you to act quickly. The longer they hang around or leave that link open, the easier it is for them to get caught. So there will always be a sense of urgency. You need to do this right now. They also appear appealing to our compassionate side. So oftentimes you might receive an email or a WhatsApp and telling you that there's some organization or a hungry child or a starving animal that really, really needs your help. And the banking details that they're giving you there might not be for the actual recipients of who you're wanting to give your money away to. So there's definitely that. And then I'm sure you guys have all been watching Tinder Swindler and all the other spin-offs that have happened from there. But flattery is another psychological tactics that these hackers are using to convince you to give away your information or, of course, part with your money in some way. So now that we've spoken about the psychological tactics that these hackers are using, let's go through the social engineering tools. So what tools are these hackers using to give your information away? The primary type of social engineering is called phishing. It's happening through email. So phishing is the number one type of target that hackers are using to get you to give away your information. Now, basic phishing happens through email, okay? So here's an example of one that was actually received by one of our clients a little bit earlier this year. They receive an email from what looks like it's coming from a representative of SARS. And so you receive this email that says, you've got a SARS letter of summons and it's, requires your urgent attention. Now, what emotional response does this elicit in you? Primarily maybe fear, a little bit of anger. You submitted your tax return last year. You either received the money or you paid over what you needed to pay and you thought the matter was finished. And now suddenly you're getting this email saying that there's a letter of summons. So your immediate action is to go and check, well, what is going on here? So you click on this link in this email and you get taken to what looks like the SARS website. And so, this looks valid. It looks like your normal SARS login. So what do? You enter your username and you enter your password, but the site doesn't go through. And our natural reaction is to either say, oh, well, my internet connection is dropping or the SARS website is down. This is frustrating, but I'll come back and check this out later. The reality of what has happened is that these hackers have managed to copy what this SARS login looks like. And all they're gathering is your username and password, and that is their objective, to gather your username and password. Now, if they have access to your SARS username and password, and they go into your SARS, just think about the amount of information that is sitting in SARS that belongs to you. I mean, we're talking name, surname, email address, ID number, where you live, what you earn, who your dependents are. There's really nothing that SARS doesn't have on you. Okay. So now we start understanding about how valuable our personal information is, because they can do anything with that kind of information. Other types of phishing include spear phishing. Now, spear phishing is more of a targeted type of phishing. Here, you might receive an email from somebody that you know or trust, somebody within your organization, and so you let down your defenses a little bit, and you can start to receive or start to consider sending your information. So here's an example. This is an example of what looks like an email that's coming from my very own HR department. And it says that a revision to my employee contract has been done. I just need to open this attachment. So there's that blue writing that is underlined. Now, anytime you receive an email that has a link that redirects you, it will be that blue writing that is underlined. It'll either say click here, or it's redirecting you. But now there's a couple of things that are concerning to me about an email like this. The first one is I happen to know that our HR department don't use the email address HR at ABS. It comes from a different email address. So that is quite strange, but you know what? They could have always created an email. So, my suspicions aren't heightened at this point. But then I look at the salutation at the end of that email. And here, for example, it says, thank you, ABS Cybersecurity, Pty Limited, Human Resources. Now, I do know that my Human Resources department would never sign off an email like that. They're a lot more casual with us. They would say, thanks, team, or one of their names from the person who's actually sending the mail. Thirdly, I haven't had any kind of indication that there is going to be any changes to our employee contract. So now my suspicions are a little bit heightened. So what I do is I hover over that link that's redirecting me, and I can see that there's a whole bunch of gobbledygook there. If I click on that link, I'm not sure that it's actually going to take me to SharePoint, for example, which is where our HR department would be sharing information with us. So here, there is quite a few indications to me that this seems to be a suspicious email. And what is the very first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to report it to my IT department and just check with them. Ultimately, the IT departments are going to be responsible for recovering our data if we are hacked. So they are definitely going to be quite grateful to me if I'm reporting something rather than clicking on the link and putting the entire organization at risk. Then we have another type of phishing, which is called smishing or SMS phishing, or phishing attacks coming through SMS. Now, I can assure you that you guys have all received very similar SMSs that look like this. So here's one that I received just a couple of days ago, and it is coming from what looks like Luno, and it says, your Luno account will be blocked. You need to click on this link to update now and keep active on our 2022 server. Now, this is a little bit worrying for me because if I have a Luno account, I know that there's a whole bunch of funds, if I'm doing some sort of trading, that are sitting in my Luno account. And my concern here, so the emotional response is fear, that once again, or anger or concern, that I'm going to lose access to the funds that are sitting in my Luno account if I don't stay active on this, on their account. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on that link to go and find out what's going on. And here's an example of the exact page that it takes me to. So if you look on the right-hand side there, there's a screenshot of what I was redirected to. Also looks quite cool. It shows me the Luno sign. It's asking me for my email address, my password, and my mobile number, which is normal for Luno. But if I have a look a little bit more carefully there, I'm going to have a look at that URL that it's redirected me to. So if you look in the SMS that I received, that link, you can quite clearly see, has got nothing to do with Luno. So if I click on that, or as I did click on that, you'll see it redirected me to a page that looks like Luno. But if you have a look at the URL on the actual web page, it actually says marineindustrialsolutions.com, which after a couple of little searching that I did, I found that Marine Industrial Solutions has got no tie to Luno at all. And all they had done is copy the Luno site and not Marine Industrial Solutions, actually. The hackers had taken this poor website and it created a subdomain of it and made it look like Luno. All they want to do is now start collecting my email address, my password, my mobile number, and what can they go and do with that? Very easily go and open up an account in my name and impersonate me. So be very, very careful about where these links are going to redirect you to. If you have a Luno account, rather go directly into your app through your phone or into the actual Luno account URL, and not clicking on a link that redirects you to some strange page. Okay, then we have another type of phishing, which is called vishing. Now this is voice phishing, and I'm actually going to show you a quick video on what vishing is. Oh. Okay, let's try that again.
So I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas for DEF CON, the biggest hacker convention of the year. They're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
Do you want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice solicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. my husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
At gmail.com?
Jessica gets access to my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Shh. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account.
Jess uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry, so there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks very much for watching that. So you'll see that vishing is voice phishing. What's happening a lot these days is that people are receiving phone calls from people that it sounds like they're phoning from the bank. And when they phone you, they're asking you to give your information to them to verify who you are. Now, when your bank phones you, generally you shouldn't have to verify who you are. You have every right to ask anybody who's phoning you and asking for your information, to ask them if you can give them a call back, because you can't see that person to verify who they are before you're giving away your personal information. So definitely do that. Okay, another type of social engineering is whaling or CEO fraud. And here what's happening is you're going to receive an email from what seems like your boss, and your boss is asking you to take some kind of action on their behalf. So you might receive an email from your boss's Gmail account saying, please contact me urgently, or please give me your email address or your mobile number. I need your help urgently. And then they're asking you to go and buy them airtime or some sort of vouchers where they, you scratch off that code at the back and you SMS them the code. And you're doing it for them as a quick favor, and they need your help urgently. And in actual fact, it is not coming from your boss at all. So sometimes what will happen is your boss has been socially engineered. They have created a Gmail account in your boss's name, and then they start emailing anybody in the organization, which they can find very easily on LinkedIn, on your company website, and they start targeting you as employees, pretending to be the boss to get you to do something on their behalf. So always check with your boss in person, or phone them directly on their mobile before purchasing airtime or whatever it is on their behalf, because if that's done in your own personal money, the likelihood of you getting a refund is minimal. Okay, then quickly on to ransomware, malware, and all these other things. So if you guys are still using flash drives or these mobile storage devices to transfer data, please, please, please be extremely, extremely careful. You need to make sure that at any rate that you are never, ever, ever picking up a USB flash drive and sticking it into your computer if you don't know firsthand where that source is coming from, because those flash drives can actually contain malware. And once it is inserted into your computer and it's on the network, it can actually, they can start going through the entire organization and gathering everybody's information and shut the network down completely. And so what is malware? Just to quickly tell you, malware is malicious software, and it's used in various forms. But basically what happens is that it's transferred from one computer to another through the network. And that is done through anyway. So all they need is to get access to one computer in an organization. And it's very much like a virus that spreads in person. As soon as they get access to other computers on that network, so that virus spreads across the organization. And then that leads us to ransomware. So what happens is once they're in the organization, they can start encrypting all the information of everybody on that network. They can demand a ransom. And then what happens is that you come into your computer the next day, try and log in, and you might get a red screen like the one that's on screen now that says you cannot access your computer until an amount has been paid for you to gain access to that data again. Okay, so quickly moving on to, I know I am running out of time, so we're going to try to get through the last bit quickly. So if you can log into your Slido and try and just recall what I said is the most common type of social engineering tactic that is used by hackers. And because we've run out of time, I'm not going to wait for the answers, but absolutely well done to the first person who logged in there. It is 100% phishing. So phishing is the most common type of social engineering tool that is used by hackers. Okay, so part 3, preventing an attack. So this is exactly why we're here. So how do you prevent your organization or yourself from becoming a victim of cybercrime? And the very first thing is, if ever you are on a public Wi-Fi. So, I mean, being in South Africa, our cell phone network drops often, either during load shedding or if we away from our homes. Often you have to connect to like a hotel Wi-Fi or the restaurant's Wi-Fi to get access. If you are doing that through your phone, please, please, please make sure that you have a VPN, which is a virtual private network. What this does is it makes sure that all the information that is sitting on your device is protected by a layer of protection, so that even though you have access to this public Wi-Fi, your information is being protected. So your phone cannot be accessed, your computer cannot be accessed. So just research on your phone, or do some research on a good VPN that will work for you. And definitely sign up for a VPN to make sure that your device is protected when you're on any kind of public Wi-Fi. The second thing to do is to make sure that if you are searching the internet at all ever, if you're on any kind of website, make sure that before you put information, any of your information, whether that's even your email address to sign up for their monthly newsletter, that you are doing that on a secure site. Now, you know a site is secure when it has the HTTPS. So the S stands for security, and that will make sure that the information is encrypted on that website and it's harder to get hacked. And then, of course, you guys know that you'll often get asked if you're going to restart your computer, if you must run your updates and restart. You'll also get notified on the bottom right-hand side of your computer. There'll be a little orange indication that there are updates to be run. So what will happen then is, like if you're on, like I'm on a Dell computer, the Dell network or the Dell are making sure that if they have identified any vulnerabilities in their software or hardware, that they are running updates to make sure that those vulnerabilities have been secured. So run your updates on a regular basis to make sure that your device remains up to date from any vulnerabilities. Okay, quickly on passwords. So passwords are the key indicator on how easy it is to get into a network. So you guys might have heard that with Transunion, one user was using the word password as his password. And that is how the hackers got into the organization, and all of our data is at risk because one person was using the word password as their password. The other risk then is if you do get compromised and you are using the same password across multiple accounts, it becomes very, very easy for a hacker to then hack multiple of your accounts. So a lot of people, and it's completely bizarre, that people are using the same password for their bank, for access into their computer, and any other random website that they're going onto. So please, 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 at all times, make sure that you're using a different password. Now, I know passwords become tricky when you are trying to remember multiple passwords for different websites. Please access a password manager. There are many, many available in your app stores. So just make sure that you're using a really good, secure password manager. And when you do that, you can save all your passwords to all various sites. And then all you have to do is make sure that the password to your password manager app is super, super secure. So how do you do that? You need to make sure that your passwords are between 8 and 12 characters long. 20 is usually better. That it contains both capital and lowercase letters, that you have a number, and definitely a special character. But more important and more easy to remember, rather than trying to remember passwords, is to create a passphrase. So if you had to think about something that it's easy for you to remember, but doesn't identify you. So let's just think it could be a Bible verse that you really like, or your, your favorite soccer team, but make it your own so that, people don't remember, wouldn't be able to hack the information that they get from that. And then don't ever use any identifiable names. So nobody that you know, no birth dates or special dates that mean something to you as part of your password. And then your password security question, which is an interesting one, because when you're signing up to a website, they'll say, if you forget your password, what security question should we ask you? And we all choose the easiest one, right? It's like my mother's maiden name or my pet's name. But all of that information is also really, really easy to find on our social media pages. So very, very important that you choose a security question that actually might be a little harder to guess, and it won't be easy for people to find on social media. And then just like in your, to get into your banking sites, please use multi-factor authentication or Google Authenticator to get into the sites that contain a lot of your personal information. Most valid sites today will ask you if you want to enable multi-factor authentication. So I know that after all the hacks that happen at LinkedIn, they've also now created an option for multi-factor authentication. Okay, and then how do you spot a phishing email? As I said, phishing emails are probably the most common type of social engineering tactics that come through. So how do you identify those? Similar to what I showed you earlier. So when you are going to get a phishing email, it is always going to ask you for, redirect you to some kind of link that asks you for more information. So if you get that blue writing that is underlined and it's going to redirect you, that is the very first warning sign of a phishing email. Once you see that and you hover over that link, if you identify where that link is going to redirect you, fine. If you don't, start looking for these for these other warning signs. The one is a demanding subject line or some kind of consequence for not acting. And the third one, of course, is if the email address doesn't match the sender domain. So if you are expecting an email from Simon at SHA, but the email address, the domain actually says Simon at Gmail, that is definitely a sign for concern. It's a warning sign, and definitely don't click on any link within that email. As I said, if you ever receive a phishing email, report it immediately. Don't hold on to it. Your IT department will be extremely grateful for the fact that you are sending them that information. Okay, that's just a visual that I added in so that you can see what a phishing email looks like. They will always, there's also other things that you can look out for. So spelling errors, hover over that link, check that it's asking you if there's asking you to do a request, an urgent request, and that you're going to gain some kind of value, or there's going to be a consequence if you don't act. Okay, lastly, on social media. So please, guys, remember that what goes online stays online forever. Everything you do on social media stays there. Even if you delete a post, it's very easy for people to be able to go back and see what you've posted 10 years ago. So please make sure that whatever you post onto social media is something that you're going to stand by and be able to justify 10 years from now. Other things that you should be careful of not posting onto social media is your location. So just remember that when you are checking in at different locations, where you are not is at home. So anybody following you on social media will know what your location is and know that you are not at the office and you are not at home, leaving those places vulnerable. Any identifiable features, So a lot of us like taking selfies at the office, but what we really, really need to consider is what information is behind us in those photos. And, could that information be not and shouldn't be viewed by other people outside of the organization? And then also just make sure that there's no slander of any form on social media. Keep that offline. You definitely don't want to face any kind of consequence for slander of your company or complaining about any other company that might have implications at a later stage. Also ignore any of those get to know you quizzes. Most of the time, they are trying to source information from you that they can use to impersonate you. And then change your privacy settings on all of your social media to make sure that you are not on a public profile created so that only the people in your network can see what you're posting. And then also, I say, get rid of those friends that you don't really, want them to know about what's going on in your life. It's liberating, getting rid of people who wouldn't greet you in the street, but still following you on social media. I don't have time to show you this other video, but if you'd like to get more information from us on any of these things that we've spoken about today, you're welcome to contact me. I'll leave our contacts in the chat. Thanks very much, Simon. I'm sorry for going over time. I'm going to hand over to you. Hello.
Thank you so much, Isabel. It's back to me. Thank you for that very informative presentation. I, for one, loved those everyday tips and nuggets that we all need to be mindful of, and that will no doubt come in handy. So a huge thank you on that. Just a reminder that we do have that Q&A function. We see the questions coming through. Do post those in that Q&A function. I see they are being addressed as we go along. Right over to the last speaker of the day, Simon Coleman is the business head of financial and digital at SHA Risk Specialist, a division of Santam. Simon is going to be addressing the risk management aspect of cyber. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you so much, Nani, and yeah, thank you, Isabel. That was a very engaging and interesting presentation. I've been involved with cyber, believe it or not, since the early 2000s. The first cyber policies actually appeared in the United States in 1998. So whilst we're talking about something cutting edge and groundbreaking today, we need to accept that this type of cover has been available for many years already. But I think what's really changed here in South Africa is the awareness and, of course, the level of cyber attacks. You would have seen when Charles was talking earlier, some of those numbers were quite scary. I think Isabel mentioned that we were the 6th highest hacked nation on the planet. And I can tell you, we do an annual risk review at SHA, and one of the things we deal with is cyber. And we've certainly seen over the last 3 years that the number of cyber attacks has gone up exponentially. So what I'm going to be talking about today, I will be touching on some of the stats. I've attended a lot of cyber presentations, and one of the things that I find frustrating often is that the statistics that are shared come from the US generally, where they obviously are quite advanced in their cyber insurance market. So I'm very pleased today to be able to share with you local stats. These are stats that we've accumulated over the last 3 years. We've chatted to thousands of business owners and brokers, and I'm hoping that you'll find those interesting. There'll be some QR codes shown at the end of the presentation. We are publishing our next annual risk review next week. Actually, we've got 2 sessions coming up on the 18th and the 25th, but I'll tell you more about that as we go on through the presentation. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. I think some of these were mentioned, but here's something from 2016. This is actually what's been going on in South Africa over the last 5-6 years. Ster-Kinekor, this was an estate agent. We're seeing a lot of this these days, estate agents and conveyancing attorneys being hacked. The deeds office also had a data breach, and 30 million people's details were leaked in that. You remember the Liberty ransomware attack that was back in 2018. I've got something here on ABSA, but you could pick any financial institution, really. They've all had their issues over the years. We had Tracker just before lockdown in February of 2020. There's Nedbank, that was also in 2020. Then we had Experian, which is just like TransUnion, where 24 million identities were stolen. We had Lombard, that was also in 2020. Stefanuti, I think you're getting a picture here that there's no industry that's kind of singled out. Stefanuti is obviously a construction business, and you would imagine probably quite low on the priority list for hackers. We had, I think this was Max Steel, that was also back in 2020, 2021. We had Transnet. Isabel mentioned that in her presentation. And then, of course, we had Transunion earlier this year, where they said there were as many as 54 million identities exposed. We've received information since then that seems to confirm it's actually closer to 4 million. But you get the picture. Now, it's very easy to look at these and they're just big numbers. But there are people that are affected behind this. And this is something we don't often talk about. This is the human tragedy of cybercrime. Now, I received this information from some of our risk managers and some online. The one on the left-hand side, this was a newspaper article where an accountant actually committed suicide after his business sustained a cyber attack. And years of tax records, all sorts of confidential information was taken, and of course caused the collapse of the business. So an awful tragedy, but just to illustrate that there are people that are affected by these. These are our clients, these are our friends and family members that are involved in these cyber attacks, and often people don't recover from them. The one in the middle comes from the UK, that's the cyber sextortion racket. Again, that resulted in suicide. A lot of embarrassment associated with that particular hacking incident. And then, of course, perhaps the one that's most relevant to us in our discussion today, 60% of SMEs closing within 6 months of being hacked. This is a global statistic. That article actually came out of the UK. But it was the article goes on to talk about how often small businesses don't have the resources to bounce back, and particularly if there's no insurance in place. Not only does the reputation suffer, but there's business interruption and possibly fines and penalties from the information regulator, which can be absolutely devastating for any sized business, but particularly for those in the SME sector. And of course, we all know this is coming off the back of the pandemic. Businesses are kind of teetering on the edge of failure, many businesses, and the last thing that they'd be able to sustain is some kind of cyber attack that affects their businesses. These stats come from Sion Ray, one of our other partners. This just shows you a list of some of the industries that are most affected in South Africa. You can see finance and insurance were quite high up on the list there. These are corporate stats, so these are big businesses that have generally been affected. It does look slightly different when you drill down into the SME sector. But as you can see, yeah, insurance and finance, I don't know if any of you can imagine why that would be the case. It's because of the quality of the information that's stored by banks and insurance companies, insurance brokers like yourselves. You've got a fairly complete set of information that a hacker could use to perpetrate identity theft. You know, you've often got FICA documents, you've got bank account details, You've basically got everything that somebody would need to create a fake identity and then go and take out some loans, which was the point that Isabel made in her presentation. Here's an interesting thing to think about. When I first started doing cyber presentations many years ago, there was probably one industry that I thought would be the least affected by cyber, and that was farming. Because you just don't generally think about technology and farming in the same context. But here you can see HSBC, a big European bank, put out this alert to their UK farmers, saying that there'd been a spike in fraud and cyber security attacks. And the reasons that they gave in this article were the farming sector, particularly commercial farming, is becoming more and more digitally enabled, digitally transformed, if you like. So there's a lot of digital automation in place. So that would be data analytics so that they can check when farming or planting, harvesting, those sort of things need to take place. There's a lot of precision agriculture that's happening in the world right now. And then you've got your process automation. Those are your irrigation systems that switch on and off remotely, automated milking systems on dairy farms, etc. So you have many commercial farms that are relying more and more on technology. And of course, if hackers can get into those systems, they can really shut down the operation, and there'd be massive business interruption and possibly a lot of damage to crops. If you think about the harvesting being interrupted or planting at a very critical time. This is a very time-sensitive industry. And then, of course, the other thing that HSBC said was, because of the seasonal nature of farming, there was a lot of cash flow flowing in and out of these commercial farms at specific times of year. And the hackers knew this. So they knew that if they got hold of the farmer in a phishing attack and said, we're a supplier of yours, please pay this into our account, and he paid it into the wrong bank account because someone had hacked into the supplier's systems or created a phishing email, that would probably happen because of the panic and the workload that's upon these farmers at that particular time of year. And then, of course, we've got the Internet of Things. That might be a term you've heard before. We're all using devices that are connected to the internet, and that includes plants and machinery, equipment, and those things become very easy to hack. And often when we're thinking about managing our passwords and our security, we forget about all the devices that are connected to our internet. We focus on our computers and our phones, and we forget about the other things. So just something to think in mind. To keep in mind, that there's no industry that's immune to this. And when you're out seeing your clients, particularly if they're in the farming sector, you can mention that. Ransomware was mentioned earlier. This is probably one of the fastest growing risks. We've seen this go up exponentially. This is a corporate stat, so it applies to big business. And you can see there 41% of the incidents facing big business related to ransomware, followed by the theft of data at 40%. In the SME sector, and this comes from our annual risk review, 2020 to 2021, 30% of the businesses we spoke to, close on 1,000 companies in the SME sector, said that they'd had some kind of cyber attack in the preceding 12 months. There was no slowdown during the lockdown. In fact, we saw a brief spike when we initially went into lockdown, and that was because of the confusion with everybody rushing to work remotely and often not thinking about the security exposures. Here you can see this is the different types of attacks on SMEs. And there you can see ransomware makes up a big chunk at 20%. You've got viruses and malware. Remember, this is aimed specifically at small businesses in 2021. And there you can also see phishing attacks, 21%. A couple of years ago, Symantec, which is the holding company of Norton's, who produce the antivirus packages, they actually said that South Africa had the highest level of phishing than amongst all of the countries around the world. So even though we were in 5th or 6th place in terms of actual hack attacks, our phishing emails were completely out of control. I don't have an updated stat on phishing in South Africa where we fit into the global standard, but I would imagine we're probably still right up there at the top of the list. We were very shocked. Sorry, there's a lot of colors and numbers on the screen, but on the left side of this, you'll see this was the stat we got in 2020. 1 in 5 businesses were attacked in 2020 and 2021 with ransomware. In 2020, 34% of SMEs said they paid the ransom, and that leapt up to 53% in 2021. So this means that more than half of businesses in 2021 had no option but to pay the ransom to the hackers to get access to their data again. Now, there's only one reason someone pays the ransom, and that is if you don't do backups. And this is something we've seen year on year in our risk review when we chat to SMEs, that they don't do regular backups. So when their data gets locked up and encrypted in a ransomware attack, they actually can't just erase and rewind like a corporate would do. They have to pay the ransom, or they have to start from zero and really just start rebuilding their database. Very, very difficult, and that is why we see so many businesses paying. Fortunately or unfortunately, the average ransom amount is still relatively low. It's under 50,000 for SMEs. It's very different when you look at bigger businesses. In the Transunion ransomware attack, the ransom that was being demanded was $15 million US. Now, the reason why this amount is so low for SMEs is because this particular scam only works if the ransom amount is low enough, if it's affordable for the SME. So 50,000, I know it's a lot of money. All of us on this call right now wouldn't like to part with 50,000. But for many SMEs, it's better than them having no data. Now, in prior years, we'd been told by the people that paid the ransom that they did actually get their data back after paying that. This changed in 2021. As you can see here, in 2021, only 43% of the businesses that paid the ransom managed to get the decryption key from the hackers. So almost 2/3 of businesses did not get that code, so they paid the money and they still didn't have access to their data. What was different in 2020 was after paying the ransom, we saw those same victims getting hit a second time. 25% of the people that paid the ransom got hit almost immediately after paying in a second attack. In 2021, we didn't see the same trend, and none of the respondents said that they'd got hit a second time. But I think what is interesting here is that the data wasn't released after paying the ransom. I'm not sure exactly why that is, because normally the criminals do release the data, otherwise people will stop paying the ransoms. But this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on as we go further into 2022 and into 2023. There are, of course, ethical dilemmas here, and this is something that certainly at Santam and amongst our competitors, there's ongoing conversation. It's a global discussion that's happening in the insurance industry. And that is it ethical to actually pay ransoms? Now, one could say, well, no, because you don't want to encourage the crime. And that is certainly what some of the law enforcement authorities in the US have been saying. But what we have to accept is that often our clients will have done absolutely everything possible to prevent a ransomware attack, and yet they still sustain one. It's one of the reasons why we rely quite heavily on the likes of AVS to help our clients when they have a ransomware attack, because there are ways that we can reverse that, and if their backup's done, then there's no need to pay. But there may, of course, still be those incidents where payment is the only option. that is, of course, the last resort, and it is something that's covered by the cyber policy. What we will have to do, of course, is just keep in mind that as the years progress, it is likely that in other territories, the payment of ransoms may be outlawed, and that may also happen here in the Republic of South Africa. In which case, the costs that that go with a ransomware attack that can be claimed under the cyber policy would really be the costs of recovering the database, getting the business back up and running, and of course covering the business interruption while they are offline. Ransomware, in my opinion, is one of the biggest threats facing SMEs in South Africa, and it has been that way for the last couple of years. Now, when our data is stolen, where does it go? I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Isabel did a great job of talking about what happens when your data is stolen. But I love this iceberg picture because it just illustrates the different parts of the internet and where the information eventually lands up. So if you can picture the top of the iceberg, that's the bit where we play on the internet collectively. That's all of our websites, Facebook, Google, Wikipedia, etc. Then we have the deep web, nothing illegal happening there, but those are generally the parts of the internet that you can't see from the outside. You would normally use a password to access that. So that's your internet banking, medical records, other private forums. That would all be on the deep web. Then we have the dark web, which is right at the bottom of the internet iceberg, if I can call it that. And that is really where our stolen data lands up. You can't just browse the dark web. You need a special router to see it. We call that the onion router, or Tor, which is the term used by people that play in the dark web. I wouldn't recommend anybody tries to go there. There's lots of things that are not fit for human consumption, if you get my meaning. Anything goes on the dark web. There's illicit kind of pornography. You can buy weapons. You can hire a hitman. And of course, you can buy stolen data. And that is really what happens. Once our information is stolen by cyber criminals, it is often not the hacker that is in the next phase. They sell that information to syndicates who then will go about creating the false identities. I just want to show you this picture. Some of you who've attended one of my talks before might remember it. This one came off a website on the dark web. It's really, it's not selling data, but it sells a piece of malware, a virus that one can insert into an ATM, and you could use it to extract all of the money. It costs $5,000 to buy this malware. But what I want to draw your attention to are these things here. So those of you that have been on eBay before might recognize this kind of layout. There is honesty amongst thieves. So what happens here is this particular vendor, he's a level 4, which is quite good. He's also got a trust level of 5, which means if you buy this particular piece of malware, you've got a pretty good chance that it's going to do what he says it's going to do. So people that shop on the dark web and buy our identities and other pieces of malware would look at these trust and vendor levels and before they part with their money. As you can see, the transaction takes place using Bitcoin or Ethereum. I'm not sure exactly what that cryptocurrency is, but these are all untraceable currencies. And that is, of course, what motivates cyber criminals to do what they do. Very difficult to track cryptocurrency, and it is one of the criticisms of Bitcoin in particular, that it's largely being used to fund cyber attacks. If you've got your phone handy, you can trust me. I'm an underwriter. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll take you to a website called Have I Been Pawned? There's no A in the pawned part. And there you can put in your email address, and it will tell you if that email address has been compromised in any of the data breaches around the world. I put in one of my old email addresses just to check it out. and a whole bunch of things came up, some of which I couldn't even remember logging into. There's that master deeds one that we were talking about. There's LinkedIn, and so on. So I think the point is, sorry, let me just come back to this slide. Isabel really spoke a lot about password management, and this is really something that we have to keep in mind in our own personal cyber posture, because if you use the same username and password on LinkedIn as you do on your banking profile, once a data breach happens at LinkedIn, it means that you are exposed on all of those other websites. And the hackers will use technology to use all of the passwords and email addresses that were taken on LinkedIn, and those will be plugged into a banking website or some other website until they get a match. This can happen within seconds, so they can run through millions of email address and password combinations. So please do use a password manager. Someone asked on the chat before I started speaking, which is a good one. The one I use is called lastpass.com. And on that, I only have to remember the passphrase for the password manager. And then I can create passwords for all of my websites going all the way up to 99 characters. I didn't have a slide for it, but I just I Googled something just before I started speaking. So this was something that was published earlier this year. And what they tell us is if you use a password, just numbers, okay, no special characters or upper or lowercase. If you have 11 characters and it's just numbers, hackers can crack that passcode instantly using technology. If you add in an uppercase, lowercase, and symbols, it would take a hacker 5 months to hack that same 11-character password. So it's a really good idea to use a password manager, because that will, of course, give you that extra protection. I can tell you no hacker is going to spend 5 months trying to hack into your profile. They tend to be very lazy and resource aware, so they do move on to the next victim quite quickly if they're unsuccessful. But what are we here for today? We're here to talk about cyber insurance, and we're here to talk about this new offering from Santam. So the policy document isn't structured like this. I love my quadrants. If you've attended one of my talks before, you will have seen these. The policy wording really has these 4 elements of cover. We have the liability section, own damage. These are probably the 2 most important elements of cover. Not that reputation and regulatory issues are not important, but I think we can focus on the liability and own damage in particular. Now, how would this work? A liability claim really happens in a cyber policy after the data breach has taken place. So those millions of identities that have been stolen in Experian or Transunion or any of the others that we mentioned earlier, once somebody sustains some kind of loss, let's just say your identity is used and someone takes out a loan, you would then want to lodge a liability claim against the business who lost your data. So in this case, in our example, it would be Experian or Transunion. That means Transunion or Experian would call on their cyber policy to cover their legal defense costs. In other words, to try and prove that it wasn't them who lost your data. It would cover the damages. And remember, when we're in the liability space and we talk about damages, it's not physical damage. Damages are really the awards that are made by a court. We haven't really seen any big liability claims in South Africa following a cyber attack, but they will come. People are becoming more and more aware of their rights, and there are more and more cyber attacks happening. And then, of course, settlements are also covered here. Sometimes the insurers will say, look, it's clear that our client is at fault and we need to settle this claim. And that would probably involve reimbursing the person who fell victim to the identity theft and had a loan taken out in their name. So the liability section is important. The own damage section, and here I like to draw a comparison with motor insurance, something we're all familiar with. If you look at your motor policy, if you've got comprehensive cover, you've generally got a liability section and an own damage section. And that own damage section is where you cover the repairs to your own vehicle. The liability section is to cover the damage to the third party's vehicle. In this case, we're not talking about damage to a car. We're talking about damage to your system. And we're also talking about damage to the third party in the way of their data being stolen and used in an identity theft. So when we talk own damage in cyber, we're talking about the costs of investigating what happened. We're talking about data breach response. Those are Charles' costs. Those are AVS's costs. When they send in there, he asked me to make reference to the roadside assistance. I think the first time I did that after we met, he was offended. He spent years studying technology, and I was comparing him to a roadside assistance or plumber that comes out to repair your geyser after it's burst. But the reality is, when the system is damaged, when you're hit with ransomware, when you can't operate, you don't really want to speak to your underwriter. You want to talk to the guy who's going to fix it. And those are the data breach response services. That is really getting somebody out to get the system restored, get it back up and running. Those costs can be significant depending on the size of the business and how severe the damage is. We also cover business interruption in this area. That's the loss of net profit. People say to me, well, how could I have a business interruption claim? I'm a broker. If I go offline, I'm just going to go and work in a coffee shop, and I'll still be able to operate. That is true. Depending on what type of business you are in, you may not have a business interruption exposure. I'll talk a little bit later about what types of businesses need which types of cover more. But in essence, if your business cannot operate because of the cyber attack, you're going to start incurring a loss of revenue. And the policy will pay that loss of revenue until you're back up and running again. To use a very simple example of a business that needs to be up and running 24/7, let's consider takealot.com. Imagine if they went offline for 24 hours on Cyber Monday or Black Friday. They probably generate 20 to 30% of their income during those sale days. If they were offline just for a few hours, their business interruption would be significant. If you have a factory that is operated or can be operated remotely using maybe there's computer-enabled technology that operates the plant, if that shuts down, you're going to have a business interruption, and it's not going to be covered by your assets policy. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. This is also where we cover the impact of the ransomware. So I think in the Santam product, you've got up to 250,000 rands worth of ransomware cover. Your own damage, you can go all the way up to 5 million, and the same on the the liability costs. And your business interruption goes up to 2.5 million. We are, of course, on standby at SHA if you have clients that go beyond those parameters, but we felt that really covered the majority of SMEs. It certainly talks to some of the stats that we spoke about earlier. We also cover theft of funds, although most businesses rely quite heavily on their internet banking. So this type of cover may never be triggered, but it is there in case somebody does get access to the insured's funds in a cyber attack. We also cover reputation. Again, depending on what type of business you're in, if you suffer a cyber attack, reputation could be quite bad. It could be quite badly affected. Think about yourselves as brokers. What are you really selling to your clients? You're selling them trust. This means that if you have a cyber attack and you have to tell your clients that their data has been breached, what is going to happen? That trust is going to suffer some kind of erosion. People might go, whoa, if you're not looking after my data, can I trust you to look after my business, to look after my business insurance? So it's very important, depending on the type of business, that we can get public relations consulting services in there to start managing that reputational fallout, sending out social media posts. It's under control. It's not as severe as you think. A very small group of clients were affected. The data that was taken was not complete, which means it's very difficult for criminals to take advantage of it. Those are the kind of messages that would be put out to clients and, of course, to the public at large. So those costs are also covered by the policy. And then finally, the last quadrant is the regulatory cover. This has become very important since POPI, or the Protection of Personal Information Act, came into full force. As Isabel mentioned, there is the possibility of a 10 million rand fine for a data breach if the regulator finds that the business has breached the regulations. I must just point out, just because a company gets hacked does not mean they're going to get fined by the regulator. There would still have to be that evidence that the business has breached the POPI Act. As you know, many businesses spend hundreds of millions on cybersecurity. One cannot say that they deliberately or negligently caused this loss of data. One could ask questions if password was used as the password, as the example was made in Isabel's presentation earlier. So the regulatory cover says we don't know if you're going to get a fine, which means we are going to give you legal costs. We're going to defend you in front of the information regulator to try and prove that you didn't breach the regulations. At this point in time, we are allowed to pay the fines, okay? So the regulator has not said to us collectively as an insurance industry that you may not pay that 10 million rand fine. But that may change. So you'll see in the policy document, it does say if allowed by law. At this point in time, it is allowed and those payments would be made. We also cover notification and credit monitoring costs. Ironically, what one has to do really when there's been a data breach is you should contact all of the people that have been affected and offer to do credit monitoring for them. And you would normally reach out to Ackerman or Transunion to provide you with that service. Those costs, they do come at a premium. It's included in your product, in the Santam Cyber product, but they can run into the hundreds of thousands depending on how many people were affected in the data breach. For example, if you just think about paying 10 Rand a month to the credit union to monitor one person's credit profile, imagine if you had 100,000 clients that were affected. So you would be paying 1 million Rand a month just in credit monitoring costs. Okay, those are covered by the insurance policy. So a very useful part, and as I said, the regulatory element has become very, very critical in managing cyber exposure through insurance. Cyber is not without its challenges, and just from an underwriter's perspective, I thought I'd share some of this with you. Often we don't get good quality underwriting information. I'm going to go through some of the questions we ask shortly. Risk quality has proved to be difficult. Now, before we went into the SME sector, we were only doing corporate cyber insurance. And I can tell you that only 8 out of every 100 risks were we able to actually write. And the reason for that was because the cybersecurity posture wasn't up to scratch. Now, we knew that when we went into the SME space, this was not going to fly because most SMEs don't have good cybersecurity in place, which is why the product that is being rolled out at Santam really includes not only the data breach response services and the helpline, we also provide vulnerability scans to our clients. And of course, most critically, is we actually pay for them to have Bitdefender endpoint security. So it's antivirus protection for SMEs. which means they can actually get proper security onto all of their computers when they enter into the insurance contract. So we become less concerned with what the quality of the risk was prior to inception. There are still some questions that get asked by the underwriters, and I will share those with you, but we've taken a sort of 10-page proposal form and narrowed it down to, I think it's 16 yes and no questions. So it's a very easy application process. The other challenge we face as underwriters, and of course for you as brokers, is that cyber attacks are really at the cutting edge, and you often find that the security companies are one step behind. But we do feel confident that with our partners that you've met today, we're on top of that, and you really do have a cutting edge solution that you can take to your clients. From the client's perspective, from the customer's perspective, we're also aware of the fact that it hasn't been easy, because often the insurance policies have these very onerous requirements. The coverage is quite confusing, and there's a general lack of awareness amongst SMEs in particular, many of whom, I've got some stats on it, will tell you they don't have an exposure because they don't have valuable data in their system, or they only have 10 clients, so they're not too worried about it. But they're not thinking about the own damage side of things. The coverage can be confusing. I've broken it down into 4 quadrants. I'm very glad to say that the Santam policy wording is only 3 or 4 pages, so it's a lot easier to understand, and it's in plain language. It's also in English and Afrikaans. But one does have to spend time talking to clients and explaining some of these things. Now, one of the comments that came out at one of the other sessions that I've done was that some competitors out there don't ask any questions. They will simply, do a quote. You can see what the premium is, and you don't have to answer any questions. Now, I just want to caution you. I call this post-loss underwriting. I'm going to show you a screenshot here. So I've taken this off another quote from a competitor. This particular quote the underwriter didn't ask any questions other than the name and address and the turnover of the business. But included in the quote were these minimum security requirements. If I could, you might say, well, my client doesn't understand the cyber questions, which is why they want to go for this type of product. I must tell you as a broker, if your client isn't comfortable answering the questions in a proposal form, you must ask yourself the question, are they going to be comfortable answering some of these or understanding some of these things? Look at this point number 6 here. Administrative interfaces such as remote desk protocol are not accessible via the internet. Where such interferences are required, these are accessible exclusively over secured channels using multi-factor authenticated VPNs. Admin interface connections are secured using cryptographic certificate-based authentication. If you do not understand the proposal form, you will not understand the minimum security requirements. There is a possible broker PI exposure here that you must be aware of. Rather, let's get some information at quoting stage when the client is relaxed than trying to figure out whether they complied with these minimum security requirements at the time of a claim. And that is why I call this post-loss underwriting. There is nothing illegal. It's not against TCF to offer this kind of cover because it is made apparent to the insured. I think the thing we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to issue a policy to a client that is not 100% comfortable with cyber, that has such onerous insurance requirements or security requirements on there? I think the answer to that has to be no. This is really the impact of post-loss underwriting. It's a seesaw. Remember these from when you were a kid? Low info provided at inception is a massively higher risk at claim time. And as I said, at claim time, that is when everybody's running around like headless chickens. Not a great time to be saying, did you comply with these minimum security requirements? Let's rather gather the information at the beginning. Coming back to what I mentioned earlier, the third party versus own damage. This is where we rely on you as the broker. You don't have to be an expert in technology or cybersecurity, but what you do have to be an expert in is your client's business. We need you to tell us. We need you to advise them correctly, depending on what type of business it is. It's a very simple diagram. On the left side, you've got businesses that are more prone to third-party liability issues, like professional services companies, like yourselves as brokers, attorneys, accountants, businesses that hold a lot of data. Those would have more of a liability exposure because there's more people that could be affected, more people that could sue them if things go wrong. In the middle, you've got your retailers, particularly those that are operating online. And on the far right-hand side, you've got manufacturers. They don't hold a lot of data. It would be wrong of you to go in there and try and sell them cyber off the back of the liability exposure. Here you need to focus on the business interruption. Because of course, if you've got a factory and you're operating in the 21st century, well, you probably have an exposure to cyber attacks that could affect the operational elements of the business. If the machinery can't operate, the factory can't move forward, and no bottle tops or whatever it is that they're manufacturing will be coming off the production line. As I said earlier, there's no cover under the assets for this when there's a cyber attack. So that is very clearly business interruption. Your retailers that are in the middle, they might have a combination, and you'll have many other clients that fall into that area. You'll see when you are using the Santam product that you can choose different levels of cover for business interruption, liability, own damage, etc. So you may go, okay, well, this client doesn't have a lot of data, so I'm going to go a little lower on the third-party liability, but I'm going to give it as much business interruption and own damage as I can. The right thing to do is, of course, for every client to have all of these covers. I think the costs have been pitched very well at the SME sector. I think the starting premium for R1 million worth of cover is about 3,500 to 4,000 Rand a year for a very small SME, and then it obviously increases, and you've got sight of those rates either when you're using Policy Center or when you're chatting to your broker consultant. So you'll be able to kind of, in a modular way, build up the cover depending on the type of business. Otherwise, you could just get the maximum amount of cover given the prices that I've just mentioned you, and make sure that they have all the elements and avoid any kind of PI issue a bit later on. Let's keep talking about business interruption. Sorry, guys, I can't see your comments while I'm presenting, so I'm hoping I'll have a little bit of time when I get to the end in about 20 minutes to deal with those, unless one of my colleagues is answering as I'm going through. When we talk business interruption, we also spoke to our clients. This was in the 2020 annual risk review. 87% of the businesses, so there were about 30%, I think you'll remember, of companies that said they'd had a cyber attack. 87% of those said they were back online within 48 hours. And then we had 12, it's actually 13%, excuse the missing percentage there, rounded off. 13% of businesses being offline for more than 3 days. And you can see on the right-hand side there, for some businesses, around 30% said it cost them more than 250,000 Rand per incident, and 7% of the victims said that it was over $1 million. This could have been insured. Unfortunately, not all of them had cover in place. In our 2021 risk review, we said, we tried to gauge the awareness, and this is what came out of that. 64% of SMEs, so almost 2/3, said that they didn't think that they were targets. Most of these were those businesses that didn't have a lot of data, but they'd forgotten about the fact that they did have automation in their business that could have been affected. 88% of SMEs believed their security was adequate. 2 out of 3 basically said that they thought their risk was low to medium. This actually contradicts what we've seen when we've been chatting to businesses. I'd say probably in 88% of the time we're finding that the security is inadequate. It's just that they haven't actually been told where the weak spots are. And of course, that's what we're there for as your underwriting team, to help with that. We also ask our brokers every year, how confident are you selling cyber? Back in 2019, there was a 26% confidence level, which was very low. That has moved up 62%, up to 65%. Most brokers said they felt they had an intermediate understanding level of cyber insurance, which is very interesting. Keep that in mind. You might be sitting there thinking, well, I'm in the 35% that don't feel comfortable with this. But look at this. We asked clients, so these are not insured clients. This was an independent survey. I think there were about 300 businesses in that sample. In 2019, 58% of those businesses said that their broker had never mentioned cyber to them. In 2021, the number had improved slightly. 46% of the businesses we spoke to said that their broker did not give them any advice or did not mention cyber insurance. What a massive opportunity for all of us on this call today, that almost half of the businesses out there have not been spoken to about cyber. I'm offering to you today, myself and my team, collectively with the CNP team within Santam, are happy to walk you through this process, and hopefully you'll be attending some more of the training sessions after we complete this one today, so that you can be in that 65% that understands the cover and is selling it. Here you can see still a massive majority of clients don't have cover. 33% in 2019 said that they had cyber insurance. In 2021, that number jumped to 39%. We also need to challenge ourselves here. My team and I were kind of discussing whether this could be true. We think the number is significantly lower, but that many SMEs might have some element of cyber that's been included in their program, and it's probably only the liability section, because that is the only part of the cover that is relatively inexpensive, and many underwriters in the country have been throwing it in with some of the other covers. Very dangerous for a client to think that they've got fully comprehensive cyber, almost like the guy who's driving his car who thinks he's got comprehensive motor insurance, but only has the liability cover. So when a client says that to you, especially if it's a new one and you're not familiar with their portfolio, you might want to ask them, is it comprehensive, or are we just talking about the liability cover here, if you come across that in your travels? A lot of people say, look, I'm not a cyber expert. I don't have a lot of skills. I don't really understand technology that much. And I don't understand all of these security things that Charles and the team were talking about. Excuse me. So what I like to do is just try and compare cyber risk to everyday physical risk management that we put in place. So these little pictures on the screen, you can see there in the top left, you've got a gate with the word private on it. You've got a CCTV camera next to that. You've got a keypad for arming and disarming the alarm. And then you've got this really ugly barbed wire fence that goes around the property. If you start thinking about data or your internet environment in the same way as you do about physical assets, it does kind of become a little simpler. You know, instead of having a gate on your data, you're going to have some kind of access point, some kind of thing that just stops people from coming in randomly. You're going to have an access point where you have to use your username and your password. You might also have something similar to a CCTV camera. Now, if you're using proper antivirus protection, you will be able to monitor what's going on, who's trying to get into your data, who's trying to get into your infrastructure, the same way the CCTV camera would be able to keep an eye on who's approaching the building. Your keypad, that's your password management, your access control to the system. And then, of course, the barbed wire fence we replace with something called a firewall. And this does the same thing, really. It's something that goes around the data, the same way the fence goes around the property, and stops people from just coming in. If it's a good firewall, you'd also be monitoring it to make sure there are no holes in that fence, the same way you would do with that physical fence that runs around the property. So very important to keep an eye on the data and to have the right things in place. So you've got access control, you're monitoring, you've got your password management, and you've got your firewall and your antivirus protection, replacing these physical things. You can see there I've got ... incentivize criminals to move next door. I love telling this story. I moved to the Western Cape in 2013. My house in Joburg had a very high wall around it with cameras, electric fencing, all of those things. I moved to the Western Cape. My next door neighbor doesn't even have a wall around their property. And I think they might have burglar bars on their windows. My house still looks like the one I had in Joburg. Big high wall, electric fencing, CCTV camera at the entrance. I think my neighbors think I'm crazy. But what have I done? I haven't stopped anyone from breaking into my property. It's impossible to do that. If the criminals got enough time and resources, they could get in anywhere. Same with cyber. What I'm saying, though, is if the criminal wants to go for the easy target, they'll go to my next door neighbor who doesn't have a wall or any of the things that I have around my property. And cyber security is the same. If you have relatively good security, you're not running a bank or something, so you're not specifically a target, it is quite easy to incentivize the criminals to move next door. And sometimes that's the best that we can hope for when we're talking about cyber risk management. Isabel did a great job of talking about awareness and training, particularly when it comes to spotting phishing emails. We do have some services that we're going to be rolling out shortly into the Santam product, one of which is cyber phishing testing. So an employer would be able to send out emails to their staff and check if they'll click on a phishing email, so they get a report on it. It helps to create awareness and of course is a critical part of the training. We run regular workshops with our friends from AVS and some of our other service providers, and that's for yourselves as brokers and of course for clients as well, so that they can get a better handle on things. You'll see that insurance is one part of this risk management matrix. It doesn't stand alone. The insurance is obviously there as a safety net to pick up the pieces, but all of these other things operate together. I haven't spoken about enforcement in the HR department, but really what we talk about there is if you've got rules regarding access to your system and employees break those rules, there have to be consequences. The same way as there would be consequences for an employee that leaves the front door open or hands out the keys to the building to a friend. So all of these things come together along with the technology that we're providing you in the Santam offering to make sure that we've got a fully comprehensive risk management matrix. Let's talk about those risk management services. So some of these services sort of click into place after the loss has happened. Some of them happen before the loss actually happens. You will be getting a copy of this presentation, so please don't try and write anything down. You can take a screenshot if you like. So we've got the Bitdefender Antivirus. We really, if clients have got something better in place, then we don't have to force them to use Bitdefender. I think that's important. But many clients don't have anything, or they're using free antivirus software, which is practically useless. There was a report published by Norton's, again, 2 years ago. They estimated that there were 1 million new viruses released onto the internet every day in 2019, 2018. Now, if you use free antivirus software, the thing that makes it free is that the provider only updates it every 30 days. So by the time you get to day 29, what has happened? You've got 29 million viruses that your system isn't able to detect because it hasn't been updated since the first day of the month. Free antivirus is useless. So we provide that to our clients, to our mutual clients. We also have something called My Cyber DNA. That is all of our clients get access to the system so that they can check their own cybersecurity posture. It provides them with a score, and there's a dashboard along with some tools that help them to manage their cybersecurity. It will also tell them if their passwords have appeared on any of the dark web searches, much like that QR code that I showed you earlier on Have I Been Pawned? So you get that same service. Then we also have our Digimune service, which is, of course, where we're doing the deep dark web monitoring, making sure that there's no data leakage or breaches or illegal selling of data. So your clients are getting all of that in one package included in their insurance premium. And then, of course, we've got AVS, our plumbers and our roadside assistants, Charles, ready to kind of send in the parabats and make sure that we can get you back up and running, get your client back up and running as quickly as possible, figuring out what happened, what data has been taken, and how severe the damage is. But really making sure that the business gets back up and running as quickly as possible. All right, I just want to go back to this as I wrap up my presentation. The impact of post-loss underwriting. That is not what we do at Santam. We gather very basic information at the start, so the client has to fill in some info so that they can get a quote. There are a few questions. I'm not going to take you through all of them right now. I'm going to focus on some specific ones that are particularly important. All of the questions are yeses and nos. If there's an answer to a no where we were expecting a yes, there would be an internal referral. You don't have to worry about it between our colleagues in the commercial environment at Santam and our team at SHA, and there might be additional information that's been requested. We're trying to keep the questions fairly basic so that we have the minimum number of negative answers, if you get what I mean. So remember, we're also providing the insured with this antivirus protection and all of these other services. So if they don't have 100% great security posture, it doesn't mean that they can't be insured. That's it. It's those 17 questions. And you can see the last few here actually relate to claims. Okay, so basically you've got 10, 11 questions where we're actually asking about the business and their security. Why do we ask about passwords? Well, it's one of the most basic things that a company can manage. If you're allowing people to have a 4-digit password and for them to use it on all of their on all of their accounts, that's a big risk. You can see here, and this report came from Sionre in February earlier this year. They said in 44% of the claims that they were involved in, the point of contact was due to a poor password. Okay, so such an easy thing to fix. And it's one of the things that we do insist on when we're underwriting these risks. Antivirus. Why do we want to know if there's antivirus in place? Sorry, I spoke out of turn earlier. The current number is 560,000 new pieces of malware every day, which means if you're using free antivirus or you're not updating it properly, you've got a massive exposure. So not only antivirus needs to be in place, but it's got to be updated regularly. We ask about backups. Do you back up your data? Now, if you don't back up your data, as I said earlier, you're going to land up with having to pay a ransom if there's a ransomware attack. And of course, we don't want to be doing that as your insurers. So what we're saying is you must have regular backups in place so that when something goes wrong, we can get you back up and running as quickly as possible without having to pay the cyber criminals. It's absolutely critical. If the backup is also infected, well, obviously then we have no option. Still a last resort, but we may have to pay the ransom in that instance. Software patching. How irritating is it when you're just about to go into a presentation or you're about to check your email and suddenly your Windows computer says, I'm doing an update. And you then go irritated, you stop it from happening. That is a terrible thing to do. It's an awful practice to engage in, because what happens is, just like the antivirus, the developers of these pieces of software, these apps, these tools that we use every day, become aware of vulnerabilities, and they will patch those vulnerabilities, making sure that if there's a cyber attack, you don't fall victim to it. We had something happen in November, December last year. It was called the Log4j Vulnerability. This was a vulnerability that existed in almost every system on the planet, and nobody knew about it until a developer picked it up. And of course, you can imagine straight after that, all of the developers on multiple systems were sending out patches to fix that. If it wasn't fixed, that business, that system would have a vulnerability that's gone unprotected. What were we saying earlier about the firewall or the hole in the perimeter fence? If you don't patch it up, somebody's going to come in there and get hold of your data and do some serious damage. So out of all those questions I showed you earlier, these are the critical ones. It's the passwords, it's the antivirus, it's the backups, and of course, it's the software patching. Those are the key issues for any underwriter. That's what we really need to know, and we really need to know that it's in place. I'll leave you with this quote. In fact, it's really aligned with what Philippa said when she opened it, the session today. What did she say? It's not if, it's when. Sorry, somebody's phoning me there. Let me just kill that. It's not if, it's when. Now, the former director of the FBI, Robert Mueller, said this. He said it's no longer a question of if, but rather when and how often. What he meant by that was, even if you've been hacked before, it's like COVID, actually. Just because you had it doesn't mean you can't have it again. And that is exactly what can happen with cyber. So it's not just if or when, it's how often is it going to happen to your business. And he chucked businesses into two categories: those that have been hacked and those that still will be. How frightening is that? It's almost like you're just waiting in line for your turn, very much like the pandemic that we've just been through. That is really the end of my presentation. I think I've stuck to my time slot. I'm Simon Coleman. If I haven't met you, I certainly do hope to do so. My email address is simon@sha.co.za. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm going to stop sharing now, and let's just see if there are any questions here. Hi, Noni.
Hi, Simon. I'm looking at the Q&A function. I believe most questions have been addressed. I believe, the team has been very quick in addressing all of the questions that all of our attendees had. But thank you so much, Simon, for that very insightful presentation as always. And just like that, we have reached the end of our session. So a huge thank you to all of the speakers for sharing your valuable insights with us here today. Simon did mention earlier on that SHA's annual specialist risk review event will be taking place on the 18th and 25th of May. You really want to attend this one. We share some really valuable insights on our specialist lines of business, cyber being one of them. So you really want to attend this one. We are going to share the QR codes as well as the links to register for both sessions. I do see that with the QR code, you just need to click on the image to download it first and then scan it. Alternatively, you can use the 2 links to just register over there. All right, I see, as I said earlier on, I think all of the questions have been addressed in the Q&A function. But if you do have any more questions, inquiries on Santam's insurance product, please do get in contact with your relationship manager who will assist further. The product is available on Santam's Policy Center. If you are looking for standalone cyber cover, this is where SHA comes in. And in this case, you can reach out to Alicia Naransamy. Her email address is alicia@sha.co.za. All right, we have reached the end of our session. And from myself, Nondutsulo Mhlungu, and the Santam team, it's been an absolute pleasure. Do stay safe and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Cheers.